unleashing a grand total of 11 live-action movies into our own galaxy to date. The Star Wars franchise boasts some of the strongest and most compelling opening half hours ever to play out on the big screen. So where do each of these first 30 minutes of live-action prequel, original and sequel trilogy mayhem, along with a few spin-offs of course, rank when it comes to the best and worst of the bunch? It is time to find out, people. Because I am Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and it is time to rank the first 30 minutes of every Star Wars movie from worst to best. Number 11, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So J.J. Abrams' second sequel earned itself last place for the opening crawl line of the dead speak alone. Now sure, as with all of the most recent trilogy movies, the cinematography, once that infuriating chunk of text had floated off screen, was rather breathtaking at times. Kylo Ren ripping his way through Mustafar is majestic. The silly lightspeed skipping sequence contains some utterly gorgeous visuals as the Millennium Falcon darts across the galaxy. And then later on in the film, the long-awaited reintroduction of the mighty Lando Calrissian was a treat too. I mean, that's got nothing to do with cinematography, but I just like to see him. But none of that changes the fact that Palpatine's baffling and unnecessary return gets things off to a frustrating start. One that the final movie in the Skywalker saga struggles to ever really recover from. In that opening 30 minutes, there's unmemorable dialogue outside of recycled lines / callbacks from prior movies, a sweet yet jarring effort to squeeze the late Carrie Fisher into the picture, and countless moments that made little to no sense at all. The aforementioned lightspeed skipping flying in the face of the established rules of jumping to hyperspace, and Finn's "they fly now" comments completely ignoring the fact troopers had boasted jetpacks since the Clone Wars are just a few. And the whole opening stretch just rushing to cram in as many nods to the past as humanly possible via cameos, themes and more set the tone early for this one. You were right to have a bad feeling about it. Number 10, Solo: A Star Wars Story. Largely remembered now as the film that had a huge impact on Disney's release strategy in the wake of its underwhelming performance at the box office, time has actually been relatively kind to Solo: A Star Wars Story. In the years since its release, those who've opted to revisit Ron Howard's spin-off tale focusing on the iconic smuggler have found themselves coming to appreciate everything from Alden Ehrenreich's charming work as a young Han to some of the enthralling action set pieces our hero finds himself in the thick of. In terms of that first 30 minutes of the Star Wars story though, it's a bit of a mixed bag really. For every terrific and rather fresh sequence, like seeing Imperial infantryman Han thrust into the middle of a pulsating war zone as the Empire's forces continue conquering the galaxy, there's a somewhat flat one. The grey and forgettable opening speeder chase doesn't exactly yank you into the screen from the get-go. Seeing the comical way Han and eventual best pal Chewbacca initially cross paths is joyous of course. And Woody Harrelson's Tobias Beckett and his crew are given strong introductions too, leaving viewers genuinely feeling a little shook as various members fail to survive a spectacular coaxium heist. But things like the eye-rolling origin of Han's last name, and the film not really doing enough to get you truly invested in Han's relationship with Emilia Clarke's Kira, ultimately weighed down this spin-off early on. And while we're talking about Han Solo, I want to know right now, what is your favourite Han Solo moment of all time? You let me know in the comments section down below. Number 9, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Seen by many as the worst of the prequels, thanks largely to its over-reliance on sometimes quite jarring CGI and some absolutely dreadful dialogue, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones' first half hour actually isn't anywhere near as terrible as you likely remember. Kicking things off with an almighty bang, the moment Padme Amidala is suddenly targeted by a bomb on Coruscant instantly gets you hooked as you wonder who is trying to take out the former Queen of Naboo. And if you can ignore Ewan McGregor's silly little fake beard during his elevator reintroduction alongside Hayden Christensen's grown-up Anakin Skywalker, the iconic duo switch from bickering bodyguards to bounty hunters during this opening 30 minutes is an absolute thrill. The actors' chemistry is at its best as they chase down a Zam Wessel who just tried once again to murder Amidala, this time in a properly intense sequence involving a pair of deadly insects. That enthralling sequence across Coruscant is one of the franchise's most underrated chunks of action too, with this speeder chase masterfully showing off more of the city planet than ever before, from the magnificent skyline to its more corrupt underbelly. Now there's no getting away from the poor way a lot of the heavily blue screen backgrounds have aged, seen in Palpatine's office and within the Jedi Temple in particular, and Lucas's dodgy dialogue strikes on a few occasions within that initial 30. But that awesome Coruscant chase and the first few trickles of John Williams' all-timer Across the Stars theme remind you that Episode 2 actually begins rather well. Number 8, Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Rian Johnson's Episode 8, The Last Jedi, quickly lets you know you're about to experience the boldest Star Wars film of the Disney era. As the Resistance look to flee from a pissed-off First Order in the wake of Starkiller Base's destruction, viewers witness the likes of Poe Dameron and co. buy their colleagues some time to escape from the planet in the opening scene. It's a beautifully shot, scored, and hugely impactful chapter, with TIE fighters shredding Resistance bombers as our heroes launch a desperate assault in the hopes of bringing down a fleet-killing dreadnought. And it's that pulsating opening stretch which sees Dameron disobey direct orders from Leia Organa, and cost the Resistance a great many numbers in the process, that sets the stage for the ensuing gripping internal drama to come. Elsewhere, Luke Skywalker's real return brought with it an entirely unexpected and undoubtedly divisive swerve, as we were reintroduced to a far less hopeful Jedi Master than we remembered from the original trilogy, controversially launching the sacred Skywalker lightsaber within his first few seconds of screen time. Charming. And Rey's attempts to figure out what's up with the bitter legend are broken up by another compelling debut of sorts, as Andy Serkis's Supreme Leader Snoke initially established himself as an imposing new big bad to be feared, perched in his marvelously designed bleeding red throne room. Oh, how little we knew. And yes, I know we saw him in the film before, but this was like the first time we properly saw him. Instead of trying to stay in any sort of Star Wars comfort zone, Johnson took a number of daring swings before the runtime had even passed 30 minutes. Some hit, some missed, but none of them are unmemorable. Number 7, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Following on from the ridiculous success of the first 3 Star Wars pictures, the pressure was definitely on as fans were giddily anticipating a return to this galaxy far, far away after 16 years. But rather than stick to the sort of grittier overall look and vibe which turned the series into a mega hit in the first place, George Lucas decided to completely redefine his brainchild, and viewers were completely immersed in that far more sleek and epic universe during the opening act of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. From witnessing Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his young Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi athletically fend off masterfully crafted digital droids, to the arrival of a whole host of distinct alien species like the Gungans and Neomoidians, Lucas was able to blend the spirit of those older Star Wars adventures into a setting and time that felt completely fresh. It's the tremendously designed Naboo that steals the show in this opening 30 though, as the story pulls us into the effortlessly grand Theed Palace, through the planet's towering droid-infested forests, underwater and into the glowing delight that is Gunga City, and away from that submerged palace as our heroes try to survive an impressively realised collection of CG beasties. And that's all without even touching on John Williams' debuting Trade Federation March theme, Queen Amidala's iconic wardrobe, and the arrivals of franchise legends Jar Jar Binks and Darth Maul. All of that within the first 30 minutes? Ooh, moi moi! Thank you very much for watching this Star Wars video today, my friend, and if you are enjoying what you're watching right now, then hit that subscribe button down below, and you'll get more What Culture Star Wars stuff in your day. Now back to the video. Number 6, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. It didn't take 30 minutes for fans to realise they were watching something special during a first viewing of Gareth Edwards' Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. That much was clear after the very first scene, damn it. Crashing down into the peaceful life Galen Erso had built for himself and his family on Lamu, director Orson Krennic brought to irresistible life by the superb Ben Mendelsohn, and his Death Troopers forcefully convince him to help complete the Empire's precious Death Star. Watching Galen's wife Lyra be viciously murdered so early on was just the first of many reminders of the cruel reality of life under the Empire at this point in the timeline. Elsewhere, the rebels are pushed to their limits too, and this is highlighted in particularly brutal and inspired fashion as apparent hero Cassian Andor shockingly murders his fellow freedom fighter Tivik, in order to ensure their intel didn't fall into the hands of Imperial forces. If it wasn't clear from those opening moments, this was not your typical Star Wars space opera. This was a war drama with some truly astonishing cinematography, courtesy of the great Greg Fraser, one that also contained morally grey figures all over the galaxy, and a rebel alliance being left with no choice but to depend on Galen's daughter Jyn to help them learn more about the aforementioned superweapon. Now sure, it's not all perfect. A digitally revived Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin and Forrest Whitaker's wheezing Saw Gerrera are more distracting than mesmerizing early on. But for the most part, Rogue One's first 30 minutes are as fascinating as the subsequent 104. Number 5, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. It's only when you take a second to really analyse those first 30 minutes of the final original trilogy film that you realise just how many iconic Star Wars moments occur during the opening scenes of Richard Marquand's Episode 6 Return of the Jedi. Outside of Darth Vader's chilling arrival on the second Death Star, the vast majority of this classic's first act takes place on Tatooine, as Luke Skywalker and the gang look to save their pal Han Solo from the clutches of Jabba the Hutt. Now yes, said plan is infamously about as complicated and bizarre as it comes, with C-3PO and R2-D2, Leia and Chewie, and Luke all seemingly trying to get a frozen Han out of the palace in their own way and failing. All while Lando Calrissian just watches on undercover. But none of that changes the fact that this sequence still contains a ton of memorable events along the way. The less said about Jedi Rocks, the better though. Luke's intense showdown with the Rancor, complete with surprisingly moving keeper reaction. Leia in that bikini. Both Chewie and Leia's lovely reunions with Han. The terrifically grotesque giant slug puppet bellowing at our heroes. All of it combines to create a properly enjoyable and unforgettable return to this world. And it is that admittedly convoluted plan which puts all the pieces in place for a thrilling sequence on the sail barge, as our heroes free themselves from Jabba, killing off the gangster and Boba Fett to bring a fun opening act to a close. Number 4, Episode 7, The Force Awakens. There are those out there who are quick to criticize the first sequel film as being a rehash of 1977's first Star Wars movie. And while you can definitely see where they're coming from, you also simply cannot ignore how much of a satisfying ride Episode 7 The Force Awakens unquestionably is, before it really goes full of New Hope as the Resistance look to take out their own Death Star. Somehow feeling both familiar and fresh right out of the gate, J.J. Abrams opts to keep the action focused on the next generation early on, as he catapults audiences back into a galaxy far, far away, quite different to the one they left behind after Episode 6 Return of the Jedi. Stormtroopers are now finally quite menacing, a new masked badass was now catching damn blaster shots with the Force, and soldiers of the First Order were interestingly questioning their place in the conflict. John Williams' latest collection of musical delights are shown off early on too, as both Kylo Ren and Rey's striking themes once again proved why he's one of the true composing goats. It's honestly the strongest extended stretch of the entire sequel trilogy, with Abrams managing to successfully introduce a whole wave of intriguing new faces, set up what should have been one of the most enthralling arcs in the franchise's history with Finn, and unleashed a ton of indelible imagery before a single OG trilogy character even pops up on screen. It's great stuff. Number 3, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The unbroken shot as the camera tilts down from the legendary opening crawl and right into the Battle of Coruscant is guaranteed to deliver chills each and every time, dropping us right into the dying days of the Clone Wars. Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi soar through the jaw-dropping chaos above the city planet as they begin their Palpatine rescue mission. If that wasn't enough to keep you glued to the damn screen, the Jedi duo then end up once again clashing with old foe Count Dooku, with Hayden Christensen's rematch with Christopher Lee ultimately leading to Darth Tyrannus losing his head. Literally. And then there's just the small matter of the live-action debut of a certain spluttering cyborg known as General Grievous, with the creepy Kalish Jedi killer's first absorbing exchange with our Jedi heroes, eventually leading to the incredible visual of the invisible hand cruiser being crash-landed on Coruscant by Anakin. It's a first chapter that leaves you on the edge of your seat, and one that contains some of the greatest visual effects in the franchise's history, as one of the final battles of the Clone Wars was exceptionally brought to life. It's just a shame then that this riveting first 25 minutes or so are then followed by yet more cringeworthy private conversations between the galaxy's favourite secret lovebirds. Mostly though, this final prequel sticks the landing in the first 30, or crash lands on Coruscant, either way. Number 2, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Regarded by many as the greatest Star Wars movie of all time, it's not exactly breaking news to announce that Episode 5 The Empire Strikes Back's opening half hour is just as extraordinary as the rest of the 1980 masterpiece, bringing us to a completely new location than any we'd seen in the prior entry. Irving Kershner's film picks up on Hoth as Luke Skywalker is out scouting in the snow, and before long this family-friendly space opera is briefly transformed into a stressful monster movie, as the son of Anakin finds himself having to use the Force to slice his way out of Wampa trouble. Classic moments such as Ben's first Force Spirit appearance, Han stuffing Luke into a Tauntaun sleeping bag, and the world's most awkward smooch all soon follow, with the Empire closing in on the rebel scum thanks to some well-placed probe droids. And speaking of the big bad Imperial army, Episode 5's ominous opening also brings with it the proper debut of a little tune by the name of the Imperial March, as various ships gather around the daunting Executor among the stars. If all of that terrific further world building and character development didn't cement Empire's first 30 minutes as an all-timer of an opening, then watching Luke and co bringing down the colossal 8080s during the inevitable Battle of Hoth via cables, his trusty lightsaber, and a thermal detonator definitely did the trick. What more could you possibly want? And number 1, Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. The movie that started it all, tasked with having to introduce audiences to not just a bunch of brand new characters and technology, but an entire galaxy far, far away and a history to go along with it. George Lucas managed to pull off the impossible with 1977's first Star Wars, and he does a lot of that heavy lifting in the opening half hour. After the now legendary opening crawl had gotten folks somewhat up to speed on recent events, an utterly hypnotic opening shot of a Star Destroyer chasing down a rebel ship told you all you needed to know about what was coming your way, a story unlike anything you'd seen before. Cue arguably the greatest villain introduction of all time as Darth Vader roams onto his secret daughter's spacecraft. The iconic image of the aforementioned Leia placing the Death Star plans and an important message within R2-D2, and both that droid and their protocol partner in crime C-3PO being blasted off to the desert world of Tatooine. And that's just the first 10 minutes. In the stellar 20 that follow, Lucas, through some unmatched creature, set, and costume design, then made you well and truly believe there was a place out there in the universe where droids were being sold off by Jawas, farm boys were dreaming of bigger things to the sound of the always moving binary sunset, and space wizards were never that far away should you run into some trouble. After saying hello there to this opening half hour, you can see why so many refuse to ever say goodbye.